By the time my wife finally looked at me, the damage already had an audience. I was standing alone under ballroom lights, while her board tore me apart with elegant smiles and lies sharp enough to bleed. The giant screen behind them flashed my private life, fake financial records, and a version of me they had already decided to hate. I waited for Celine to cross the floor, take my hand, and remind every woman in that room that I was her wife. Instead, she only said, "Elara, come with me." Not, "She's innocent." Not, "Don't touch her." Just 3 cold words while my humiliation spread across the room like perfume. So I walked away. But I only made it as far as the underground garage before I realized the scandal was never the real trap. Because the same night my alpha told me to stay away, she was the one who dragged me into the dark and refused to let me go. The charity gala lights turned her diamond earrings into little knives, and the text on her phone was even colder. "Emergency vote. Stay where you are. Don't make a scene." She stared at the words until they lost shape, then lifted her eyes toward the grand staircase, where guests were still drifting beneath chandeliers like elegant ghosts. At the top of the stairs, the giant foundation screen glowed gold with donation numbers, the veil name, and the polished lie that powerful women did everything with grace. Below it, Elara stood alone in silver silk with her heart cracking so quietly no one heard it. No one except Marianne Voss. Marianne always heard weakness. She crossed the marble floor with a champagne glass in one hand and sympathy arranged neatly across her face. "Celine sent her regrets," Marianne said softly. Elara did not bother pretending surprise. "Did she?" "Emergency board motion." Marianne sighed like the world exhausted her. "You know how these things are." Elara almost laughed. "No," she thought. "You know how these things are. You built half of them." She folded her phone into her palm. "She could have called." Marianne's smile sharpened by half a degree. "She assumed you'd understand." That one landed exactly where it was meant to. Elara looked toward the doors again, half hoping Celine would walk in anyway, all dark composure and impossible authority, cutting through the room like a blade through silk. Celine did not come. A violin quartet continued to play near the east wall. Waiters moved through the crowd with silver trays. Women who adored scandal and called it concern watched Elara from behind polite expressions. Marianne tilted her head. "You should sit." "I'm fine." "Of course." Marianne's gaze moved meaningfully over Elara's face, her dress, the empty space at her side where Celine should have been. Still, being left alone on a night like this must sting. Elara met her eyes. "You seem unusually invested." "I'm invested in the foundation." Marianne lifted her glass. "And in appearances." There it was, not even subtle. Elara took one breath and decided she would not give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. "Then perhaps you should attend to your own." Marianne smiled wider. "Oh, I intend to." The main screen flickered. A tiny interruption at first. A stutter in the polished gala montage. Then the gold background vanished. A photo filled the room. Elara's smile disappeared before she could control it. The photograph was of her private loft. Not just the exterior. Inside. Her kitchen counter with Celine's coffee mug still by the sink. Her shawl thrown over a chair. The second image came too fast for her to think. Her bedroom. Unmade sheets. The third was worse. Elara in that bedroom wearing one of Celine's white shirts, barefoot, smiling at someone behind the lens. The ballroom went silent in the way only rich rooms could go silent. Not shocked exactly, but thrilled enough to stop breathing. The fourth slide appeared. Bank records. Foundation funds. Transfers. A private account with Elara's name beneath it in brutal digital text. Fraud. Someone in the crowd gasped. Someone else whispered, "No." A third woman said, with the reverent disgust of someone gifted a perfect scandal, "I knew that marriage was reckless." Elara's body went cold from the inside out. She looked at Marianne. Marianne did not look back. She watched the screen like a woman admiring art. "You did this," Elara said. Marianne finally turned, all offended elegance. "That is a serious accusation." "That account is fake." Marianne sipped champagne. "Then I'm sure the auditors will say so." More whispers spread across the room. Names. Money. The word wife said like a diagnosis. Elara took one step toward the stage, then another. But security had already moved to block the stairs. Not for her safety. For containment. And then the doors at the rear of the ballroom opened. Celine Vale entered with the board counsel at her side, and 6 years of discipline written into every straight line of her body. Her black suit fit like midnight and power. Her dark hair was bound low at the nape. Her expression gave nothing away, which in Celine's language meant she was furious enough to burn the room down and had not decided yet whether she would. The crowd split for her automatically. It always did. Female alphas like Celine did not need to demand space. The world gave it to them on instinct. Elara waited for her, not as chairwoman, not as Vale, as wife. Celine stopped beneath the screen and looked up once. Just once. Then at Marianne. Then at Elara. For one brief, devastating heartbeat, Elara saw it. Shock. Rage. Fear. Then it vanished under control so complete it felt cruel. "Turn it off," Celine said. No one moved. She did not raise her voice. She never needed to. "Now." The screen went black. The room remained ugly. Marianne stepped forward in careful sorrow. "Celine, before this goes any further, the board deserves transparency." "The board? Of course." Elara stared at her wife. This was the moment. Celine would kill the lie, cross the floor, stand beside her, and make the entire city regret existing in the same room. Instead, Celine said, "Elara, come with me." No denial, no defense, no hand offered, just instruction. Marianne's mouth almost curved. Elara felt it like a slap. "You think I did this?" Elara said quietly. Celine's eyes fixed on hers. "Not here." 3 words, cold enough to freeze blood. Marianne murmured, "How unfortunate." The crowd leaned in without moving. A room full of women who would later describe themselves as horrified and remember every detail with pleasure. Elara's heart knocked once against her ribs, hard and painful and humiliated. She looked at Celine and saw not rescue, but management. Not my wife. A crisis. Something to contain until the board vote was done. The thought hurt so sharply she almost folded around it. Instead, she straightened. "Enjoy your emergency," she said. "Elara." That one word came lower, rougher, closer to the woman Celine was in private. It almost worked. Almost. Elara turned and walked out before she could break in front of them all. The service corridor outside the ballroom smelled like polish, citrus, and stale flowers. Her heels struck the floor too hard. A perfect rhythm for humiliation. Left alone. Again. Managed. Again. Told not here. Again. By the time she reached the staff elevator, she was shaking so badly she had to stab the button twice. When the doors closed, the mirror inside showed her a woman who still looked expensive, composed, untouched. Only her eyes betrayed the damage. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Not Celine. Unknown number. "Get to your car now." Another message followed before she could think. "If you stay in the building, you won't make it to midnight." Her stomach dropped. A joke. A threat. Both. Then a third message came. "She knows. She still won't choose you." Elara stared at the screen until the elevator doors opened into the underground garage. Concrete. Oil. Rainwater tracks shining under fluorescent light. Too empty. Far too empty for a gala night. Her car sat 3 rows down. She started toward it anyway because fear moved faster when it had no shape. Halfway there, she heard it. A heel against concrete. Then another. Then the soft click of a weapon being disengaged. Elara turned slowly. One woman stepped from behind a pillar. Tall, beautiful, blonde, unknown, alpha, not hiding it at all. A second emerged to the left, then a third behind the parked cars. They were dressed like private security and moved like something worse. The blonde smiled without warmth. Elara Vale, Elara backed toward her car. If this is extortion, I'm in no mood. This isn't extortion. The blonde lifted a pistol. This is leverage. The shot cracked before Elara understood what she was seeing. The blonde jerked sideways, blood tearing through her shoulder. 2 more shots followed. One attacker dropped. The other threw herself behind a car. And then Celine was there, not descending from a ballroom this time, not composed, not polished, moving. A shadow crossing concrete at impossible speed. She hit the second alpha hard enough to slam her against a sedan and strip the weapon from her hand in the same motion. Elara ducked on instinct as glass burst somewhere behind her. Celine fired once more, then grabbed Elara by the back of the neck and forced her low behind a pillar. Stay down. Elara should have fought the command. She obeyed before anger could catch up. Celine's body blocked hers from the open lane. The scent of rain-dark cedar and pure alpha adrenaline wrapped around Elara like memory and danger at once. The blonde attacker laughed through pain. Too late, Vale. Celine did not even look at her. Move. She dragged Elara toward the freight lift at the rear wall. Another shot rang out. Concrete chipped near Elara's heel. Celine turned mid-stride, fired twice, and the sound stopped. The lift opened. Celine shoved Elara inside, got in after her, and slammed her palm onto a hidden panel Elara had never seen before. The doors closed. The elevator moved down, not up. Down below any floor marked for public access. The enclosed space smelled like metal, gunpowder, and Celine's skin. Elara pressed herself against the mirrored wall. What the hell was that? Celine checked the pistol with cold efficiency. An abduction attempt? By who? That can wait. No, it can't. Celine finally looked at her. Not soft, not cruel, just stretched thin by something worse than rage. You are alive. Elara laughed once, sharp enough to cut. Is that my new role now? Celine's jaw tightened. This is not the time. That's what you keep saying. Elara. No. The elevator hummed deeper underground. You don't get to drag me out of a parking garage after leaving me to bleed upstairs. Celine's expression changed. Barely. Only enough for Elara to know the hit landed. I did not leave you. You did not stand beside me. Celine looked away. That hurt more than a denial. The lift opened into a hidden concrete bay where a matte black armored SUV waited with the engine running. 2 trusted security women stood nearby. Celine stepped out first. Elara stayed where she was. One of the guards glanced at the floor. The other pretended she had lost the ability to hear. Celine turned back. Out. No. The single syllable echoed. Celine's face went still, dangerously still. Elara. Say it again. Out. Elara stepped back farther into the lift. Interesting. The guards disappeared even more professionally. Elara's pulse pounded, but humiliation was louder now than fear. At the gala, you said not here. She swallowed. In the garage, you said stay down. She held Celine's gaze. And somehow every time you speak to me, it sounds less like love and more like a security protocol. For a second, something flashed across Celine's face. Too fast to name. Then it hardened again. Get in the car. Make me. That was a mistake. Or maybe it was the first honest thing she had said all night. Celine moved one step closer to the lift. Not threatening. Worse. Certain. Elara. Her voice lowered. The precise register she almost never used at home. Alpha command. Controlled. Weighted. A pressure that landed at the center of the chest and pushed. Now. Elara hated that her body reacted before her pride. She stepped out of the lift with every muscle resisting. "If you ever do that to me again," she said through clenched teeth, "I will never forgive you." Celine's eyes darkened with something like immediate regret. "Good," she said quietly. Elara stared. "What?" "Stay angry." Celine turned toward the SUV. "It will keep you sharp." The answer was so monstrous, so completely Celine, that Elara almost laughed in disbelief. Instead, she got into the car. The convoy moved through hidden gates and into the industrial outskirts of the city. They crossed silent streets lined with freight depots and shut down factories until the lead vehicle turned into a warehouse compound behind unmarked walls. Rain streaked the windows. The city lights vanished behind concrete. Elara sat with her hands folded too tightly in her lap and did not look at Celine until the car stopped inside a sealed loading bay. The safe house was nothing like the world outside it. Warm light. Polished concrete. Steel. Glass. No decoration except function. A kitchen. An office with layered monitors. 3 bedrooms. A private medical room. A staircase leading nowhere visible. Everything built for secrecy, speed, and siege. Everything about it told Elara the same thing. There were places in Celine's life she had never been allowed to know existed. That realization hurt more than the gala screen. One of the guards approached. "Outer perimeter secure, ma'am." Celine nodded. "No calls routed through the main network." "Yes, ma'am." "Marianne Voss, full surveillance." "Yes, ma'am." Only then did Celine turn back to Elara. "You're staying here?" Elara laughed quietly. "Of course I am. It's safe." "No." She looked around at the hidden cameras, the reinforced glass, the locked doors. "This is controlled." Celine's mouth flattened. "Tonight those are the same thing." "Not to me." Celine moved toward the office. "Elara, East Room." Elara did not move. "Is that an order too?" Celine stopped. The back of her shoulders looked rigid enough to break. "It's the safest room." "It's your room." "I know." Elara stared at her. "You're not sleeping alone tonight." The words struck harder than they should have. Not because they were tender. Because Celine said them like fact. No blush, no hesitation, no room for argument. And after everything, that certainty landed directly where Elara's anger lived and confused it. She folded her arms tighter. "I'd rather sleep in the hall." "Then I'll sleep in the hall." Celine met her eyes. "But you're taking the room." Elara looked at her for one impossible second. There was the contradiction, the wound, the whole marriage in one line. "Stay away. Come closer. Don't make a scene. Don't leave my sight." She hated how well Celine could ruin her with 7 words and a flat tone. "I want the truth," Elara said. "You'll have it." "When?" "When I can tell it without putting a target on your back." Elara barked a laugh. "I'm already the target." Celine's face changed then, not visibly to anyone else. To Elara, yes. A fraction too much pain in the eyes. A fraction too much tension in the throat. That was the terrible thing about loving Celine. She never gave much. Elara had learned to read the crumbs like scripture. "Go to the room," Celine said. Elara should have refused on principle. Instead, she turned and walked, because if she stayed 1 second longer, she might either slap her or kiss her, and both would end badly. The East Room looked exactly like Celine's mind felt from the inside. Controlled, sharp, beautiful only when no one was looking too closely. Dark wood, a wall of rain-streaked glass facing an enclosed courtyard, a bed too large for one person and too intimate for peace, a reading lamp, a locked cabinet, a drawer filled with clothes still in packaging, emergency clothes, emergency home, emergency life. Elara stood in the center of the room and felt suddenly, violently tired. She had married a woman who built secret sanctuaries and still could not say the sentence that would have saved her in a ballroom. A knock came once. Then the door opened. Celine entered carrying a folded shirt, soft pants, and a small first aid kit. "I'm not injured," Elara said. Celine set the things down. "Your wrist." Elara looked. A bruise had formed where someone in the garage grabbed her. Anger made people ignore pain until later. "It's nothing." Celine looked at her the way she looked at flawed security architecture. "Sit." "No." "Elara." "No." Silence stretched between them. Then Celine said, "Please." That stopped everything. Celine almost never said please when no one else was around. Not because she was incapable, because asking cost her too much. Elara sat at the edge of the bed before Pride could regroup. Celine knelt in front of her. That was worse. Much worse. Because it reminded Elara too vividly that for all Celine's public coldness, in private she had once touched her like something precious enough to undo. Celine took her wrist carefully and began wrapping it. The antiseptic was cold. Her hands were warm. The contrast hurt. "Did you know they were going to use me tonight?" Elara asked. Celine did not look up. "I knew they were moving." "That wasn't my question." "No." "Did you suspect?" A pause. "Yes." Elara laughed softly. There it was. The truth at last. Small, late, infuriating. "You still let me walk into that room. I told you not to come. You said it was boring. It was supposed to be." Celine's fingers tightened once, then loosened. "I misjudged the timing." Elara stared down at her bent head. "My public ruin was a timing issue." Celine's jaw flexed. "They wanted you humiliated before I could lock the board. You talk about me like an asset they touched first." Celine looked up finally. Something hard and helpless moved behind her eyes. "I talk about you like the only thing they knew would get to me." That landed too cleanly. Elara hated it. Hated more that a part of her wanted to hold the sentence to her chest and sleep beside it. Instead, she pulled her hand away. "Then maybe you should have protected me in public instead of collecting me in a garage." Celine rose slowly. "I was trying to keep them from escalating." "They still escalated?" "Yes." "Then your strategy failed." Celine held her gaze for a long second. "Yes." That one startled Elara enough to make her blink. Celine almost never admitted failure in one word. Not to the board. Not to enemies. Not even to herself. Elara looked away first, because the truth in that simple yes felt too intimate after such a night. "Leave," she said. Celine remained where she was. "I'm sleeping here." "In your own room?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because if they breach the house, this room is the last interior line." Elara laughed. "There it is again." "What?" "Everything with you is walls and lines and threat analysis." Celine said nothing. Maybe because she knew it was true. Maybe because she did not know how to be anything else. Elara lay back on the bed, fully dressed, just to make the point. Celine moved to the armchair by the window, holstered her gun on the side table, and sat without taking off her jacket. "You're going to stare at me all night," Elara muttered. "Yes," Celine said. It should have sounded cold. Instead, it sounded like a vow. Elara turned away before the answer could matter. She woke sometime after midnight to the sound of rain and the low murmur of Celine's voice by the window. The room was dark except for the glow of the phone screen. "No," Celine said. A pause, then colder. "No." Elara stayed still. Celine's private voice was one of the rarest things in the world. She gave it to almost no one. "You had no clearance to touch the gala servers." Another pause. "I don't care what Marianne promised." Silence. Then a sentence that made Elara's chest go tight. "If she is not in custody by dawn, it will only be because I want her watched." Celine ended the call and stood for several seconds without moving. Then she crossed toward the bed. Elara closed her eyes on instinct. She felt Celine pause near her shoulder, felt fingers hover just above her hair without touching, then retreat. The armchair creaked again. In the morning, there was coffee outside the door, fresh clothes, and a tablet already filled with headlines. Chairwoman's wife linked to foundation fraud. Society gala in shock. Insiders claim marital strain. Elara nearly threw the thing at the wall. The door opened before she could decide. Celine entered in a clean shirt, dark trousers, and the same controlled face that had made half the city fear and desire her in equal measure. She set a folder on the dresser. "Eat." Elara lifted the tablet. "This is what your silence bought." Celine took the insult without blinking. "I have forensic teams on the source files." "Oh, good." Elara smiled without warmth. "Maybe they can also locate your spine from last night." That hit. A tiny narrowing of Celine's eyes. Otherwise, nothing. "You should eat." "I should leave." "No." "There it is." Elara got off the bed. "You don't defend me. You don't explain anything. And then you lock me in your room like a prized witness." "You are not a witness." "Really?" Celine's gaze held hers. "You are my wife." The words came too late. They still hit. Elara hated herself for that. She crossed her arms just to keep from reaching for the sound of them. "You remembered." Celine's mouth tightened. "I never forgot." The room went still. Elara should have looked away. Instead, she looked closer. Celine's left cuff was freshly changed. Too freshly. Blood had stained the first one. A cut at the base of her throat had been covered badly with makeup. Fatigue sat under her eyes like a second shadow. She had not slept. Of course she had not. It did not excuse the ballroom. It did make anger more complicated than Elara wanted. "What happened to your neck?" Celine glanced at the mirror as though she had forgotten it existed. "Nothing." "Elara, eat," she said, as if answering the question she wished had been asked. Elara almost laughed at the evasion. "Turn around." "No." "Turn around." Celine's voice cooled. "This is not your concern." That did it. Elara crossed the room, took Celine by the tie knot, and yanked her forward. Celine let herself be moved. That startled Elara more than if she had resisted. The cut at her throat was small but too close to the pulse. Someone had tried and nearly succeeded. "This," Elara said softly, "is nothing." Celine looked down at her with a gaze that should have carried irritation, and instead carried something far worse. Relief. That Elara still cared enough to be furious. "It's a scratch." "You liar." "You sound disappointed." "I'm considering making it worse." Celine's mouth almost moved. Almost. Elara fetched the antiseptic with movements sharper than necessary. Celine sat on the edge of the desk because Elara pointed there without thinking, and Celine obeyed without comment. That was the problem with old love. Even the fights remembered their habits. Elara touched the cut with gauze. Celine's hand tightened around the desk edge once. "Does it hurt?" "No." Elara gave her a look. "A little," Celine amended. "There. That." pain. No. Celine held her eyes. You. Elara's hand stopped. Don't. Why? Because I'm still angry. Celine looked almost pleased by that. Good. Elara cleaned the cut harder than necessary. Celine hissed softly. Excellent, Elara muttered. A dangerous silence fell. Not hostile, not kind. Worse, intimate. I didn't defend you fast enough, Celine said. The words were so unexpected, Elara nearly dropped the bandage strip. At the gala, Celine added when Elara said nothing. I should have stopped it before you heard the first whisper. Elara pressed the bandage into place. And yet I chose the board for 3 minutes. Only Celine would phrase betrayal like a tactical error and somehow make it sound like confession. Elara stepped back. Why? Celine looked at the floor. That alone told Elara how ugly the truth would be. Because if I broke cover before I knew which women were moving with Marianne, they would have gone to the next phase at once. The garage. Yes. Elara laughed once in disbelief. So you let them use me to buy time? Celine said nothing. That was answer enough. I hate the way you love, Elara whispered. The sentence slipped out before she could stop it. Celine closed her eyes for one terrible second. I know. You always choose the strategy. I choose survival. You choose for me. Celine opened her eyes. If I lose you, nothing I built matters. That should have felt like a victory. Instead, it felt like a wound she had been carrying without a name. Elara looked away because standing in front of that much truth in Celine's voice was almost impossible. No one knocked on the door for the rest of the morning. Food appeared and disappeared. Reports came by encrypted tablet. Celine worked from the command room downstairs but returned every 40 minutes, as if checking perimeter integrity, and not the woman in her bed. Elara noticed every time. She hated that she noticed. At noon, she found the outer corridor locked and stood staring at the biometric panel like it had personally offended her. Celine appeared behind her before she could decide whether to smash it. It's sealed for a reason. I'm not a child. No. Elara turned. Then stop treating me like one. Celine looked tired enough to drop the truth by accident. You are the one place they'll keep pushing. Elara folded her arms. Then maybe let me push back. No. There it was again. The wall, the gate, the instinct to contain before she could think. Elara stepped closer until only inches remained between them. You keep saying stay away. Celine frowned. What? You say it without saying it. Elara's voice shook now with anger and something messier underneath. Stay out of the boardroom. Stay out of the investigation. Stay in the room. Stay behind me. She swallowed. And every single time you say it, you're the one pulling me deeper into everything. Celine stared at her. The air tightened. I'm trying to keep you alive. And I'm trying not to disappear inside your protection. That one hit hard. Celine looked away first. That almost never happened. Before either of them could say more, the lights cut out. Only for 2 seconds. But in a house like this, 2 seconds was a gunshot. Emergency lights flooded the corridor red. An alarm sounded once and stopped abruptly. Celine moved instantly. Elara, behind me. No. Celine turned sharply. This is not the time. It's never the time with you. A hidden panel slid open at the far wall. Behind it, a narrow armored passage. Move! Elara planted her heels. Tell me one truth first. Gunfire cracked somewhere downstairs. Celine's control frayed at the edges. What truth? Why Marianne framed me? A beat. Because even now Celine tried to choose. Even now she weighed honesty against efficiency. Then another shot rang out. Celine said, "Because she thinks you're my weakness." Elara stared. "And?" Celine's gaze locked on hers. "She's right." Everything inside Elara went still. Celine grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the passage. The panel sealed behind them just as more shots sounded below. The corridor beyond was narrow, lit only by floor strips and one keypad at the end. Celine put herself between Elara and the sealed wall out of pure instinct. "Elara, listen to me." "No." The word broke out of her. "No, you do not get to say that and then go cold again." Celine's breath came harder now, but her eyes held. "She wants the board." "Then let her have the board." "I don't care about the board." "That's a lie." "Yes." Celine's mouth tightened. "It is." They both went quiet at once. Honesty had begun to taste dangerous. Then the secure panel at the end of the corridor flashed amber. The office line was trying to connect. Celine answered on speaker. It was her chief counsel, clipped and urgent. "Marianne has called an emergency review under the Foundation Ethics Clause." Celine swore softly. "Already?" "She's using the Gala allegations to force a vote on conflict of interest and fiduciary corruption. She wants my controlling share frozen." "Yes, ma'am." Celine closed her eyes once. The board, the clause, the timing. Elara watched the calculations move behind her face. So that was it. The Gala had never been about money. It had been about image. And image was leverage. Celine opened her eyes. "Delay the vote." "We're trying. You have 20 minutes. The line died. Elara looked at her. "They were never trying to destroy me." Celine held her gaze. "No. They were trying to remove you." "Yes." "And I was the weapon." "Yes." The corridor seemed to shrink around them. "You should have told me." "I know." Celine's voice turned rougher. "I was wrong." Elara stared because Celine did not say that lightly. Maybe she had never heard those words from her wife so plainly before. She hated how much it mattered. "Then stop deciding for both of us." Celine said nothing. That was its own answer. Elara stepped toward the keypad. "What are you doing?" "Getting us out of your panic hallway." "You don't know the code." Elara entered 4 numbers. The lock clicked. Celine went still. "How?" Elara glanced back. "The date of our first bookstore receipt." Celine stared at her like the answer had entered under her ribs and stayed there. "You used it for something." Celine's mouth parted, then closed. "You remembered," she said. Elara opened the door. "Unlike some people, I make room for things that matter." The secure office was a controlled disaster. 1 overturned chair, a shattered monitor, 2 unconscious guards breathing but down near the far wall, and a woman in tactical black rising from behind the console with a silenced pistol in her hand. Celine moved first. Elara moved faster than she thought she could. She grabbed the heavy brass desk lamp and hurled it. The lamp smashed against the woman's shoulder. The shot fired wild into the ceiling. Celine hit the attacker from the side, took her down across the console, and drove the weapon away with brutal precision. It was over in seconds. The woman slumped unconscious against broken glass. Celine turned on Elara with fury so sharp it nearly cut. "What did I tell you?" Elara's breath came hard. "You tell me too many things. You could have died. So could you." "That is different." Elara laughed in disbelief. "No." She took 1 step closer. "It isn't." The words hung between them. Celine looked as if she wanted to shake sense into her and kiss her at the same time and hated both options. Then the central monitor lit up. Marianne appeared on screen from the Foundation boardroom in a cream suit, and perfect makeup, already seated beneath the veil crest like she belonged under it. The review had started. Celine went to the console. "They won't hold." Elara moved to her side. "What do you need?" The question landed. Celine looked at her. Not as problem, not as thing to protect, as answer. Marianne's voice filled the room through speaker. "Since Chairwoman Vale is apparently unavailable, this review will proceed based on the evidence before us." Elara's pulse quickened for a new reason now. Not fear. Pattern. "Wait!" Celine's hands paused over the keyboard. "What?" "The fake transfer." "Yes." "It was never meant for auditors." Celine looked at her sharply. "It was for the room." Elara pointed at the cached event logs on the side panel. Marianne needed emotion first. She wanted the scandal witnessed. Exactly. Elara bent over the screen. She inserted a file into the live feed. Celine was already searching. "If the ballroom servers cached the overlay, we can pull the render signature." "Not just that." Elara scrolled farther. "Look at the press access timestamp." Celine leaned closer, shoulder brushing Elara's. Heat. Memory. Dangerous. A photographer had been assigned to the left staircase angle 30 minutes before the feed crashed. Reaction shot. Marianne wanted Elara's face. Celine's voice went cold as ice. "She staged your humiliation for the record." Elara laughed softly without joy. "I gathered." Celine turned toward her fully then. Not the screens. Her. "I am going to destroy her." The sentence should have frightened Elara. Instead, it warmed something terrible and old in her chest. "Take a number," she said. Celine almost smiled. Almost. The board review continued on the main monitor. Women speaking in legal phrases sharp enough to sever careers. Marianne used concern like lace over poison. Celine's counsel stalled. Only barely. Then Elara saw it. A reflection in the boardroom glass behind Marianne. Silver hair. A hawk-shaped ring. One woman half hidden in shadow. Pack counsel. Celine followed her gaze and swore under her breath. "You know her," Elara said. "Councilwoman Harrow. Your board is in bed with pack enforcement." "Part of it." Elara leaned back, suddenly cold. "That's why the garage." "Yes." "They needed leverage with blood weight." "Yes." "And you still thought you could keep me out." Celine looked at her. "I wanted to." "There is a difference." Celine's face changed by 1 degree. To anyone else, nothing. To Elara, everything. Regret. Real regret. Marianne's voice sharpened over speaker. "If Chairwoman Vale has abandoned this review, we must assume tacit admission." Celine's counsel cut in. "We object." Marianne smiled into the camera like a woman posing beside a grave she had dug herself. Elara took one breath, then another, then said, "Bring me in." Celine turned so fast, the office seemed to move with her. "No." "Yes." "Absolutely not." Elara folded her arms. "She wants me displayed." I said no. "She thinks I'm shame." Celine stepped into her space. "You are not going into that room." "Then stop me." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Celine's eyes darkened. For one terrifying second, Elara thought command would come again. Instead, Celine said, lower, rougher, human. "Do not ask me to do that." The plea in it nearly broke her. She swallowed hard and kept going. "You said she thinks I'm your weakness." "Yes." "Then let me be the weakness that ruins her." Celine looked at her like she had walked into the room carrying fire in both hands. "Why are you doing this?" Elara laughed once. "Because I am tired of being carried out after the damage." A silence. Then, very quietly, "Because I love you enough to hate the way you keep trying to save me without me." Celine's hand came to her waist before she could stop herself. Hard, instinctive. A grip that said stay and closer and mine and fear all at once. Elara felt the contact everywhere. You make this impossible, Celine whispered. Good. Celine's eyes dropped to her mouth for one brief, unguarded second. Then she stepped back and turned to the screen. Fine. Elara blinked. Fine. Celine was already issuing orders. We don't go to the boardroom. Then what? We force them to connect here under the emergency ethics protocol. That's allowed. It is if the evidence suggests active tampering with the original review environment. Elara smiled slowly. So we make Marianne defend the room she poisoned. Celine met her eyes. Yes. For the first time since the gala, they moved together without fighting each other for direction. Celine rerouted the review channel. Elara organized the cache files, the press assignment records, and the live feed overlay evidence with the ruthless precision of a woman who had once built an entire literary archive because no one else respected fragile truths. Counsel arrived by secure line. An independent auditor joined. 2 hesitant directors connected remotely. Marianne accepted the rerouted review because refusing would have looked guilty. Of course she did. Women like Marianne never believed the trap would close around them until they were already in it. The split-screen hearing began. Celine at the head of the safe-house table, Marianne in the boardroom, auditor, counsel, directors. Then Elara, seated at Celine's right hand. Marianne's smile flickered when she saw that. Only once. But Elara saw it. Good. Marianne spoke first and beautifully. She always did. Concern. Stewardship. Integrity. The kind of language women used when they wished to murder reputations without staining their manicure. Then she turned to Elara. Mrs. Vale, if this is all a misunderstanding, perhaps you can explain the transfer that appeared above your own image. Elara looked straight into the camera. I can explain why you wanted it to. Marianne's smile thinned. How theatrical. You pre-positioned a photographer for my reaction shot 32 minutes before the feed changed. A file appeared on screen. Timestamp. Access log. Assignment note. Marianne did not blink. Press positioning is routine? Not for private scandals before they exist. Another file. The ballroom cache. The inserted overlay signature. The external shell company routing. The auditor leaned closer. One director whispered, My God. Marianne still did not crack. She was very good. Too good. So now we believe an entire system conspiracy sprang up around a simple ethics concern. Elara kept her voice level. No. We believe you needed a witnessed scandal large enough to justify an emergency morality clause before the board vote. One of the directors turned sharply. What morality clause? Celine answered before Marianne could. The one Vice Chair Voss intended to use to freeze my family share under public reputational risk. Silence. Beautiful silence. Marianne recovered faster than most women breathed. This is absurd. Celine's gaze stayed icy. What is absurd is routing gala overlays through a shell vendor tied to militia procurement channels. The next file hit the screen. Marianne's face finally changed. Not collapse, not panic. Just the smallest loss of control at the corners of the mouth. Enough. The auditor sat back slowly. I want the full vendor chain. Celine nodded. You'll have it. Marianne laughed, too lightly now. We are circling fantasies. Elara leaned forward. No. She pointed at the dark boardroom glass behind Marianne. We are circling your witness. Marianne's body stilled. Only for a fraction. But enough. Elara, Celine said quietly. Elara kept her eyes on the screen. Councilwoman Harrow has been standing behind you for 11 minutes. The boardroom camera shifted abruptly. Too late. The reflection caught silver hair and the hawk ring once more. One director swore aloud. The auditor's face turned to stone. Marianne rose too fast. "This hearing is compromised." "No," Celine said. "Now it's honest." The room held its breath across 2 locations and a dozen years of power rot. Marianne looked at Celine with open hatred. "You married a liability." That one was meant for the auditors, for the directors, for the old instinct in every ruthless structure to treat love as weakness and softness as rot. Celine did not even glance at anyone else. She looked only at Elara. Then she spoke into the record. "I married the only thing in my life that was never a transaction." The hearing went silent. Elara forgot the shape of air. Marianne tried to speak. Celine cut cleanly across her. "I asked my wife to stay away from my world because I believed distance would protect her." Her voice did not shake. That made it worse. "It only taught her to stand alone while I hid behind strategy." Elara's eyes burned. Celine went on. "That mistake ends now." Marianne slammed a hand on the table. "This is sentimental nonsense." The auditor spoke over her. "This is motive." Security entered the boardroom behind Marianne at the same moment. Not Harrow's people. Federal ethics enforcement. Celine had prepared for that too. Of course she had. Marianne saw them and finally lost the smile. For the first time she looked exactly what she was. Not elegant. Hungry. "That woman will ruin you," she hissed at Celine. Celine leaned back with terrifying calm. "She already improved me." It was over after that. Not cleanly. Power never died clean. But the clause froze pending investigation. The board lost its nerve. Marianne was escorted out under protest. Harrow vanished before anyone could reach her. When the lines disconnected, the office fell into a silence that felt almost holy. No alarms, no whispers, no cameras beyond the private house feeds, just Celine and Elara across the table with too much history and one truth now said too publicly to ever be taken back. Elara stood first because staying seated felt impossible. Celine remained still for 1 second longer, then rose too. Neither moved closer yet. That somehow hurt more than a fight. "You should have said it upstairs," Elara whispered. Celine's face tightened. "Yes." "You should have said it years ago." "Yes." Elara let out a breath that almost shook. "I wanted to hate you." Celine said nothing. That was wise. "At the gala," Elara went on, "when you stood there and looked at me like a problem to handle, I thought maybe I had imagined everything private between us." The words cost more once spoken aloud. The room listened. Celine listened harder than any room ever had. "Elara." "No," she raised a hand. "Let me finish before you fix it into neat language." Celine closed her mouth. Elara almost smiled despite herself. "Good." "I know your world is brutal," she said. "I know your board would eat a wound and call it governance. I know your mother raised you to survive first and confess later." Celine flinched at that one. Barely. But enough. Elara took one breath. Then another. "But I am not a threat vector." The words landed like stone. "I am your wife." Celine's composure cracked in the smallest visible way. Her throat moved. Her eyes darkened. Something in the center of her face softened and broke at once. "I know," she said. "Then stop locking me out with the enemies." A long silence. Not empty. Working. Celine crossed the room slowly, every step deliberate, as if she had to choose not to rush. When she stopped before Elara, there was still half a hand's breadth between them. Enough room for refusal. Enough room for truth. "I don't know how to do this without trying to control the threat," Celine said. The honesty of it nearly hurt more than apology. then learn. How? One word. Not pride. Not excuse. How? Elara's anger shifted shape in that moment. It did not disappear. It became something more dangerous. Hope. Start by telling me when it's ugly, she said. Celine listened like she was receiving instructions for a bomb she had built herself. Tell me when you're afraid. A pause. Then Elara added, because the room already knew. Because there was no point in pretending after what Celine had said into an ethics review watched by half the city. And stop saying stay away when what you mean is come closer. Celine's hand moved to Elara's waist with excruciating slowness. Not taking. Asking. Elara did not step back. The contact felt like heat after frostbite. Celine lowered her head. Stopped. Waited. For all the control and command and impossible discipline, she still waited. Elara closed the distance herself. The first kiss was soft enough to be dangerous. Not because it was innocent. Because it wasn't. It was relief and grief and anger and old need all at once, pressed into one quiet collision of mouths in a room still smelling faintly of broken glass and overheated circuitry. Celine made a low sound against her lips that nearly undid Elara. She knew that sound. How rare it was. How hard won. The second kiss deepened before either of them meant it to. Elara's fingers found the front of Celine's shirt. Celine's hand tightened at her waist as if anchoring herself to the one honest thing left in the building. When they broke apart, neither moved far. You don't get forgiveness that easily, Elara whispered. Celine's forehead rested briefly against hers. I know. I mean it. I know. And I am still furious. Celine's mouth almost curved. Good. Elara laughed despite herself. The sound startled them both. Celine looked at her like she had found water in a desert, and did not trust it yet. That almost broke her more than the kiss had. Then the secure line rang. Of course it did. Celine closed her eyes for 1 second. I hate timing. That may be your most human quality. Celine kissed her forehead once, impossibly gentle, then reached for the phone. Yes. Silence. Then her entire body changed. The warmth vanished. The woman from the boardroom returned. No. Worse. The daughter. Say that again. A pause. Long. Sharp. When Celine ended the call, her face looked carved from black stone. Harrow took my mother. Elara blinked. Your mother? She was moved from the clinic 10 minutes ago. Why? Celine looked at her as if the answer offended existence. Because Marianne failed. Everything shifted again. Not resolved, not finished, just interrupted by a worse truth. Elara reached for her coat before Celine could speak. No, Celine said immediately. Elara stopped and looked at her. We were doing so well. This is different. It is exactly the same. She will use you. She already did. Celine crossed toward her. Harrow knows what you are to me. Elara's heart beat once, hard. Then stop acting like that should send me running. It should. Why? Because if she can't break me through the board, she'll break me through blood. Elara stepped closer until their breaths touched. Then stop trying to keep me out of the war your enemies already dragged me into. For 1 second, Celine just stared. Then something in her expression gave way. Not surrender, exactly. Recognition. She exhaled slowly. Get your coat. The old pier jutted into the harbor like the spine of something dead. Fog drifted low over black water. A single warehouse lamp burned at the far end, turning the damp wood silver in patches. Celine drove the first car herself. No convoy in sight. Of course the others would be hidden. She bent rules. She never broke survival. Before they got out, she turned to Elara in the dark interior of the car. No matter what happens, Elara held up a hand. If you say stay away, I'm walking into the ocean. For one startled second, Celine almost smiled. Then her eyes went serious again. Fine. Good. A silence. Then Celine reached over and fixed the collar of Elara's coat with careful fingers. Such a domestic gesture under such violent circumstances that it nearly stopped her heart. I am not good at this, Celine said quietly. Elara knew she did not mean negotiations. I know. But I'm trying. Then try with me. Celine's fingers lingered 1 second longer than necessary. I am. They stepped out into salt air. At the far end of the pier, under the warehouse light, stood Councilwoman Harrow in a long dark coat with Celine's mother seated in a chair beside her, wrists bound but posture regal enough to insult the ropes. Even abducted, the woman looked expensive and annoyed. Harrow smiled when she saw them. So this is the wife. Celine moved half a step in front of Elara on pure instinct. Release my mother. Harrow laughed softly. You still mistake requests for leverage. Celine's mother looked from daughter to wife without speaking. Something like grim understanding passed through her face. Harrow noticed it too. How touching. She paced once around the chair. You could have signed away the port channels and spared us all this theater. Celine's voice cooled to lethal calm. You tried theater already. And it almost worked. Harrow's gaze slid to Elara. Your Omega was useful. Celine's hand clenched once at her side. Elara is not useful, she said. She is not yours to measure. That landed in the salt air like a promise and a threat together. Harrow's smile sharpened. Oh, but she is exactly the measure. She tilted her head. Marianne was right about one thing. Careful, Celine said. I rarely repeat myself. Harrow ignored the warning. You tell women to stay away when what you really fear is how quickly they'll learn where to cut. Elara went still, because that, twisted though it was, held a splinter of truth. Monsters were good at that. Not lying exactly, just finding the truth shaped like a blade. Harrow gestured. One of her women brought forward a tablet. Transfer authority on the logistics channels, Harrow said. Sign it, and your mother goes home breathing. Celine looked at the tablet, then at her mother, then at Harrow. No. One of Harrow's guards pressed a gun to the older Alpha's temple. The movement was ugly in its simplicity. Elara's pulse turned loud. Celine did not move. Of course she did not. Every angle in her head was already being measured. Distance, wind, shooter placement, probability. Impossible. Then Elara saw it. The rope around Celine's mother's wrist. Loose. Not much. Enough. The older Alpha had worked one knot down, not to escape, to wait. Celine, Elara said under her breath. What? Your mother can break left. Celine's eyes flicked once. Understood. Harrow's attention sharpened. The gap had already begun to close. Elara stepped forward. I'll sign. Celine turned so fast she nearly reached for her. What are you doing? Buying you time. Elara, trust me. The silence that followed was so brief it almost did not count. Yet it was the first time all night Celine let the trust sit, without trying to overrule it. Harrow smiled and handed over the tablet. Elara took it with steady hands and looked down. Port authority, emergency transfer, irreversible on sign. She lifted the stylus, then drove the tablet down hard against the pier railing. It shattered and dropped into the water. Everything moved at once. Celine's mother threw herself left with surprising force. The guard's shot went wide. Celine drew and fired before the sound finished echoing. Elara dove behind a piling as two more guards opened fire from the warehouse stairs. Wood splintered. Salt spray rose. Celine moved through it all with terrifying precision, returning fire from a low angle, driving Harrow's women back behind cargo drums. A shadow lunged at Elara from the side. A fourth guard she had not seen. Elara caught the woman's sleeve and turned with all the panic and fury in her body. The two of them crashed into the railing. The woman slammed an elbow toward her face. Elara ducked, grabbed the heavy emergency flare case bolted to the post, ripped it free, and swung. The metal box cracked against the attacker's temple. She dropped. Elara's hands shook. She did not have time to notice. Across the pier, Harrow was backing toward the warehouse with Celine's mother dragged partly upright in front of her and a knife at her throat. Of course. Women like Harrow always kept one more ugly move hidden. "Drop it!" Harrow shouted. Celine stopped. Her mother did not struggle. The older Alpha's face was stone. Elara's mind raced uselessly. No clear angle, no shot, no time. Then Celine's mother spoke for the first time. Her voice was dry with contempt. "Celine." "Yes." "Marry better." Harrow blinked. Just once. That was enough. The older Alpha drove backward with all her weight. Harrow's grip slipped. Celine fired. Harrow hit the pier hard and did not rise. The harbor went still except for the hiss of rain and the sea knocking softly under the boards. For 1 second, no one moved. Then Celine was crossing the pier, not toward Harrow, not toward the dropped weapon, but toward Elara. She reached her, caught both sides of her face in shaking hands, and searched her with eyes blackened by adrenaline. "Are you hurt?" The question stunned Elara silent. Not the channels, not the hostage, not the kill. Her. "I'm fine." Celine looked unconvinced. Her hands moved over Elara's shoulders, ribs, arms, checking for blood with a kind of frantic discipline that hurt to witness. Only when she found none did she stop. Then she lowered her forehead to Elara's temple and breathed once like a woman who had almost drowned. "I thought..." She did not finish. She did not need to. Elara's hands came up to hold her without thinking. "I know." Celine's fingers tightened in the back of her coat. "You shattered a negotiation tablet." "It was ugly." Celine let out a broken, incredulous laugh. "It worked." "That's become my style." "You do not have a style in armed extortion." "I do now." Celine actually smiled. Small, shocked, real. It changed her whole face. Elara nearly forgot the bodies, nearly forgot the water, the rope burns on Celine's mother's wrists, the blood on the pier. Behind them, the older Alpha cleared her throat with imperial disapproval. Celine straightened at once. Her mother approached, flexing one hand and pretending she had not just used her own abduction as a tactical opening. She looked at Elara first, measured, assessed, then nodded once. "You hit hard enough." Elara blinked. "That may be the nicest thing you've ever said to me." The older woman's mouth moved faintly. "Do not become greedy." Celine almost sounded 13 again when she said, "Mother?" "What?" "You were taken." "Yes. You should not be making comments about my marriage right now. Your marriage was relevant to the rescue." The older Alpha's gaze moved between them. "Inconveniently so." Then, to Elara's complete shock, she added, "Well done." Not warm, not loving. Still, well done. Celine looked more unsettled by that than by the gunfire. The drive back to the safe house happened in a blur of headlights, salt, and the slow collapse after terror. This time Celine did not let go of Elara's hand for a single mile. No one commented. No one was stupid enough. By dawn, Marianne was in formal custody. Harrow's channel network had begun to unravel, and the board that had watched Elara be ruined on a ballroom screen was now busy rewriting statements about ethics, trust, and internal betrayal. Women in power loved moral language when it could clean blood off money. The safe house courtyard smelled of wet stone and rosemary after rain. Celine stood beneath the covered walkway with exhaustion carved into every line of her body. Coat gone, shirt sleeves rolled, a bruise forming along one cheekbone. No witnesses, no screens, only them. Elara faced her and saw every version of the woman at once. The ruthless chairwoman, the impossible alpha, the wife who had failed her in public and held her like something breakable in the dark. "I'm still angry," Elara said. Celine nodded once. "I know. You should be." "Yes. I'm not saying that so you can apologize beautifully and make me soft." Celine's mouth tightened. "I know." Elara took a breath. "When Marianne said I was your weakness, part of me hated how much it hurt that she was right." Celine went completely still. "Not because I mind mattering to you," Elara continued. "Because I mind only mattering when danger forces you to admit it." That one landed. Celine's eyes darkened with something raw and old. "You matter when nothing is wrong," she said. "Then prove it when everything is calm." The quiet that followed felt more intimate than any kiss. Celine stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Enough to show she wanted to. "I can do war," she said. "I can do pressure. I can do rooms full of women who want my blood." A breath. "I do not know how to do this without gripping too hard." The honesty in it nearly undid Elara. Not because it fixed anything. Because it was Celine without armor. Rare enough to feel sacred. "Then start small," Elara whispered. Celine waited. No interruption. No correction. Just attention. "Tell me when you are afraid." A pause. Then Celine said, "I was afraid on the pier." Elara's heart squeezed, not because of the words, because Celine said them plainly, like she had decided truth might be survivable after all. "There," Elara said softly. "That." Celine's gaze searched her face. "As in better?" "Not easy." "No." Elara almost smiled. "Better." Celine looked at her as if better might be the most beautiful word she had heard in weeks. Then Elara added, because there was no point pretending now, because the night had dragged every secret into weather. "And stop telling me to stay away when what you really mean is you don't know what to do when I'm close." Celine's hand came up and cupped the side of her neck. Warm, careful, unmistakably hers. "What I really mean," Celine said slowly, "is that I lose precision around you." Elara laughed softly through the ache in her chest. "You say that like it's a flaw." "In my world, it is. In mine, it's the only honest part." Celine lowered her forehead until it rested lightly against Elara's. No command, no control, just contact. "Teach me." The words came out almost invisible. Elara closed her eyes because that was how impossible it felt to hear them. Then she opened them again and gave the only answer that made sense. "Come closer." Celine kissed her in daylight. Not in crisis. Not after blood. Not because one of them might die in the next minute. Just because they were standing there and the truth had finally become too large to step around. It was slower this time. Chosen. A promise instead of an accident. Elara's hands rose to Celine's shoulders. Celine settled at her waist with a reverence so devastating it made breathing difficult. When they parted, Celine stayed close enough that their foreheads brushed. "I failed you," she said. Elara swallowed. "Yes. I am going to keep failing in smaller ways while I learn." A helpless laugh escaped Elara. "That may be the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." Celine's mouth curved. "It's also the truest." Elara looked at her. Really looked. at the fatigue, the bruise, the woman who had spent her entire life surviving and still found herself asking how. Then here is my truth. Celine waited. I'm moving back home. Celine blinked. I did not know you had left. I did in my head at the gala. For the first time in all the years Elara had known her, Celine Vale looked genuinely alarmed. Elara kissed her once, quick and merciful. Relax. That is a cruel thing to say to me. You earned some fear. Celine's hand tightened at her waist. I had enough of it when you picked up a flare gun. It worked. That is not the point. It keeps being the point. Celine exhaled, half laugh, half surrender. The next week tore through the city with the hungry speed of scandal. Marianne named names. Directors resigned. A procurement network tied to Harrow collapsed under investigation. The foundation launched an ethics review so public and expensive, it could almost be mistaken for shame. Flowers arrived at the Vale house from women who had watched Elara burn on the screen and now wished to be seen supporting her recovery. She threw half of them out. Celine threw the rest out after reading the cards. Their home did not become easier overnight. That would have felt false. Instead, it became honest in awkward increments. Celine started saying where she was going even when the answer was just downstairs. Elara started telling Celine when silence felt like abandonment, instead of expecting her to guess it from the way she stirred tea. The first time Celine said in front of a legal team, "My wife will stay for this conversation," Elara almost dropped her pen. The second time it happened at dinner with investors. The third on a foundation call. Each time Celine said it with the same calm she used to close acquisitions, and each time something old inside Elara stopped shaking quite so badly. There were setbacks. Of course there were. 1 month later, Celine cancelled an anniversary lunch for a regulatory emergency and Elara nearly walked out on principle. 2 weeks after that, Elara found a private security memo routed around her and accused Celine of slipping back into control through habit. They fought in the kitchen. They fought on the stairs. They fought once in the car outside the foundation office and ended only because Celine pulled over, rested her forehead on the steering wheel, and said with brutal exhaustion, "I am trying not to love you like a fortress." Elara stared at her, then laughed so unexpectedly that both of them broke. That was the thing they learned slowly. Their issue was never one argument. It was fear wearing different clothes. Celine feared loss so much she locked doors. Elara feared being unchosen so much she sharpened every hurt into proof. Love did not erase those habits. It made them visible enough to fight properly. One rainy evening in late autumn, Celine sat at the edge of their bed, still in work clothes, files spread around her like a private siege. Elara took the top folder and set it aside. "Important," Celine said automatically. "So am I." The answer came easier now. Celine looked up, then quietly, "Yes." Elara moved to stand between her knees. "You're doing it again." "What? Leaving before you leave?" Celine's hands came to her hips on pure instinct. "I'm not." "You are." A pause. Then Celine let out a breath and rested her forehead against Elara's stomach like a woman too tired to pretend she was made of harder material. That used to happen only after nightmares or near death. Now it happened when she trusted enough to lean. "Harrow's allies are quiet," Celine murmured. "That worries me." Elara threaded fingers through her hair. "There." "What?" "You said it." Celine looked up. "Worries me." "Yes." Elara smiled. "That." Celine's mouth brushed the inside of Elara's wrist. "Better." "Not easy." "No." "Closer?" Celine's eyes changed. There it was again. The word they had stolen back from all the others. "Yes." Some things softened after that. Not all. Enough. The next gala season arrived in winter. The same chandeliered room, the same staircase, the same screen. Nothing and everything changed. When Celine asked Elara to attend, she did not send a message through an assistant. She came home early, took off her gloves in the kitchen, and asked in person. "Come with me." Elara studied her. "Not as damage control." "No." "Not as evidence." "No." Celine held out her hand. "As my wife." Elara took it. The ballroom noticed the second they entered. Of course it did. Women always noticed when a powerful alpha corrected a public mistake in the same place she had made it. Celine did not leave Elara alone at the stairs. She did not step ahead and expect her to follow. She walked in at the same pace, Elara's hand in hers, and let every camera take what it wanted. Let them see. That was the point now. Halfway through the evening, a financier with perfect teeth and poor instincts leaned too close to Elara and said, "I've wanted a private conversation for months." Before Elara could answer, Celine turned with serene menace and replied, "That desire will remain unfulfilled." The woman retreated immediately. Elara looked up at her. "Subtle." "I tried." "No, you didn't." Celine's mouth curved faintly. "No." Later, after speeches and donor pledges, and 3 women who pretended not to remember the old headlines, Celine drew Elara onto the moonlit terrace overlooking the city. Cold air, silver skyline, no one near enough to overhear. For a minute they stood with the noise of the gala behind them and the quiet of the glass doors between them and everyone else. Then Elara asked the question that had lived under her skin for months. "When you kept saying stay away, what did you really mean?" Celine looked out over the lights before answering, long enough that Elara almost smiled at the habit. Then she turned and said, "I meant if you came too close, they'd see how much I loved you." The honesty of it still had the power to wound. The honesty of it also healed. And now, Celine's hand rose to the side of Elara's neck, warm, steady, now familiar in all the ways that mattered. "Now I think letting them see is the point." Elara smiled. "That sounds dangerous." "It is." "Good." Celine lowered her forehead to hers. "No more stay away." "No?" A whisper of a smile touched Celine's mouth. "Only come closer." And this time when Elara did, neither of them mistook it for weakness. Below them the city glittered. Some enemies were gone. Some would always remain. That was power. That was marriage. That was life with a woman like Celine Vale. But on the terrace, with no hidden room left between them that had not been named aloud, Elara finally understood the difference between being protected and being erased. One made a woman vanish. The other let her stand in the light and still be wanted there. When Celine kissed her beneath the winter stars, there was no command in it. No strategy, no shield, only invitation, only truth. Only the dangerous, beautiful promise that from now on, if the world came for them again, it would find 2 women standing side by side instead of one woman left alone beneath a screen.